Because we know that racism is institutionalized and systemic, what is being done to train service providers in recognizing and managing implicit bias against those seeking services?
Excellent question. I think the reality is we have got to call out that disparities exist, and we've got to own the data. So we recently had an organization come in and actually share the disparities, and that race changes outcomes across all of the human indicators in North Carolina. So we are actually becoming more educated, and it's gotta be foundational. You've gotta have an equity strategy in everything you do, and it doesn't mean equal, it means equity, and so equity is different.
There's a really good recent study that James Ford, who was on stage earlier today, has recently done looking at implicit bias in K through 12 as well. I'd commend that to all of you. Others?
I'd say, so on the ground, yes. The 70 people who work for crisis assistance, we started 2 or 3 years ago with education and awareness, and they're all at different levels. And so we've done numerous things from, we chartered a bus down to Montgomery to see the From Slavery to Jim Crow exhibit. We paid for them to go to a museum here that had an incredible exhibit, No Justice, No Peace. We've taken bus tours of the community, done book clubs on color of law, and now they have figured out that we're serious and we're not stopping. And so this coming year, we'll bring in intensive one-on-one training for every employee in the agency, and it won't stop.
All right. We've got, okay, every time I refresh this, there are 5 more questions. Let's talk, maybe have each of you give an example, or anyone that feels comfortable with it, giving an example of how you've reached across agency or funding lines. So what's a specific example? You've all talked in theory about how important that is. Maybe give an example of what that really looks like in practice, where you've said not, I'm sorry we can't do that because we can only fund X. And you've said, well, what if it's X prime, or what if it's Y?
I think part of that is to try to look to see what the common thread would be. You know, again, I mentioned oftentimes our divisions, you know, prior to Secretary Cohen had worked in silos, and that meant you had your specific budget that was interdepartmental and then outside of the department. And I think if we look for the common thread, that we can then have some creative thinking about how those dollars can be spent on individuals.
Yeah, I think the thing that we do through our City Works Career Centers is, again, look, what can we serve the customer? What do they need? Is it skills? Is it training? Who can pay for it? What are they eligible for? That's where we work with our partners with vocational rehabilitation or other agencies to see where they have funding for that if they're not eligible for any funding we may have through our Career Center. You've got to think about the individual first and try to serve them. And again, knowing all the options within your community is important. We've looked at the single stop as an option to tie in with our NC Works Career Center. In our opinion, it would be great to have that because you could tie in all the resources to have that access available for the career counselors and individuals in the career centers. That's a vision we'd like to see come to fruition for all of North Carolina.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that a little bit, with WIOA, the Workforce Investment Opportunities Act, that federal legislation really mandated, which we gladly do, the core partners within that program to braid and blend their funding. So with infrastructure funding agreements, then our vocational rehabilitation offices and our division services for the blind and some programs within DSS often contribute to the WIOA efforts.
And we greatly appreciate that.
You're so welcome.
There's the partnership.
I can think of one person, one example. We have one of these special partnerships with communities and schools because of their proven outcomes in helping children with their education. And so when their social workers go into the home, because Johnny's not been coming to class, they recently went to one, and it was the home of a hoarder. They did not have running water. And so our funds say to do rent and utilities. Nothing in our funding stream says help clean a house out so that the children and the family can live in cleanliness, but that's what was needed, and that's what we wrote a check for.
Yeah. Kudos. The traditional United Way, we destroyed our funding model and actually went back to the community and said we're an open funding organization and we want the best organizations to apply for funding to address the root causes of generational poverty. Everyone does not like us, but those who are now being funded who traditionally have been excluded from United Way funding are excited and they are addressing the root causes, and we are outcome and performance-based. Performance matters. And so that has been a real change for us. And then funding our integrated service delivery, we went to put an RFP in the marketplace and said, who wants to be a lead partner to address the root causes of poverty, and will you bring a set of nonprofits along with you as core participants in place-based strategy to bundle and sequence services to families who are living in poverty? And it's working.
Thank you. This could be for anyone. How do you help people without a high school diploma? How do you help folks at that earlier stage?
I think it's important to speak truth to people without a high school diploma. You will live in generational poverty likely for your entire lifetime without getting the basic competencies. So we really encourage them to at least get a GED to represent basic competencies that employers are looking for. In our market, there are very few employers who are actually employing for careers with no high school diploma. So it's like the ABCs of employment. We got to get them a job, which potentially can be no high school diploma, but a better job is probably going to require a high school diploma, and C, a career is going to require some level of credentialing and skills. So we speak truth.
I think what we do is to help individuals first determine, even if you don't have a high school diploma, you may have been working and you've gained some skill sets. Identify the skill sets first, then let's work on getting that up to speed along with getting your GED. We've had individuals get their career readiness certification, national career readiness certification, a gold level certification, and they were a high school dropout. Why didn't they complete high school? Various reasons, family, other issues that led to that. That means they're not uneducated or can't learn. It's just they need a different learning environment. So take the skills, take the GED, work from there to build a career, not just get GED as the next level. You've got to help people understand that their skills are what gets them employment, which gets them better jobs. Building upon that will overcome anything. That and a good attitude makes it overcome any kind of issues that may be out there in the workplace. And just quickly, for those of you who want to connect with workforce development boards, the North Carolina Association of Workforce Development Board website is your connection, ncawdb.org. And you can find any of the 23 local workforce boards in North Carolina, covering 100 counties with great directors and staff and career centers ready to serve you.
I used to work for a TV station, and the call letters were 4 letters, and they asked me how to spell it all the time. And so, I'd be put in this weird position of having to say, when they spelled it, it's spelled W-R-A-L. And they couldn't quite understand it. So it's NCAWDB, right?
Absolutely. Or just Google North Carolina Association of Workforce Development Boards, or preferably centronworks.com, but that's another reason.
We have a lot of members of the faith community in the audience today. We have 3 questions that are related to that. For those that don't necessarily have a crisis assistance ministry or even a United Way that's right next door to them, how could members of the faith community connect to the sort of work we're talking about today?
I know for us, it'd be just simply reaching out to a workforce development board, one of your partner agencies, whether it's the Department of Social Services or any of the organizations in your counties. They all have connections on that. And as any of those faith community are very, very much important what we do. Feed My Lambs is a great ministry in Anson County, and we've connected them with our 50-plus job club, because a lot of job seekers come in here with 50-plus who also needed food. They have that ability to do that. Churches are very important, as you saw earlier, from our outreach to our customers. Very important to do that. So all I do is just make the phone call. Reach out. Yeah. People willing to help. People willing to partner. Again, none of us can do this alone.
Right.
We've got to have people to help work with us on this.
211 is available to all 100 counties of North Carolina. It is really important to tap into that, to at least make you aware of resources that are very local. So 211.
And I would just add one thought. I think back to the 70s when a lot of these were created, and I made it sound pretty quick and easy. It started about 1973 with one pastor talking to another pastor. And by the way, and I can say this as a child of a pastor, there was sometimes a little difficulty even getting that to happen. And so there was even some barriers that had to be broken down. And so over time, it took 2 years. We didn't start till 1975 for the pastors to continue to come together and finally one day say, we're going to create a 501c3 and send our money there and trust the people that are going to be hired by that agency.
Leslie, if I could offer one thing, taking the moderator hat off for a moment. You mentioned communities and schools. Bill Milliken is the founder of Communities and Schools, and it's interesting that it was formed out of his experience coming out of Young Life Ministries because somebody cared enough to impact him as a teenager. And faith-based community must remember this, Bill Milliken says it, that programs don't change lives, relationships do.
Yes.
And so if we will all remember that we have an opportunity to influence someone else and let them know that they're not alone, that is how we all can fill the gaps and support the work that each of us is doing to make North Carolina remain one of the greatest places to live.